Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to everyone from all part of the world. And today we are here together to bring you the NIFTA Leadership Series webinar on risk and debt management. So, as you are all aware of the situation, what we are all going through in COVID-19, the apparel supply chain is being hugely impacted by the financial restructuring by the global retailers. Manufacturers have more visibility on how do they secure their payments and have access to the agencies, government agencies, the bankers, the insurance company, brokers, and the lawyers around the world to find solution for themselves and keep going. So to introduce you to the panel, Brian is a shareholder of FSG Lawyers, and he chairs the firm's corporate and business practice group.
I'm an attorney practicing in Southern California, just south of Los Angeles, specializing in the apparel industry. My details are on file with the group, so I'm happy to answer any questions specifically for people if any issues arise.
We have Ravindra Mishra. He is the DGM for the of SME in Delhi Circle, looking after NCR, Uttarakhand, parts of UP and Haryana.
Yeah, I'm Ravindra Mishra. I'm Deputy General Manager in the State Bank of India, which is the biggest bank in India. And I have handled various positions in credit, foreign exchange, and have experience of corporate finance of around 50,000 crore also. Now I am handling 25,000 crore of portfolio. I cover the area of entire NCR. I have Uttarakhand under me and Uttar Pradesh also and Haryana also. So it's largely, basically all the area which are large exporters are there. Thank you so much.
Vivek Kohli, he is the senior partner of Jews Law Associate and Attorney General of Sikkim.
Good evening. My name is Vivek Kohli. I am a practicing lawyer in Delhi for the past almost 30 years. And I also have had the honor of holding the position of the Advocate General for the state of Sikkim. My main areas of interest in practice have been commercial litigation, arbitration, and laws relating to insolvency and bankruptcy in India.
Well, we have Ketan Kale from he's from Marsh, which is a US-based insurance broker.
Hi, this is Ketan Kale from Marsh and McLennan companies. I'm part of the structured credit and political risk team of Marsh, and I'm based in Dubai. My specialization is in credit insurance and political risk insurance. Thank you.
As well, we have got Subhash Chahar. He is the head of large exporters branch of ECGC. And he has also handled the buyer's underwriting and the claims.
Hi, this is Subhash Chahar. I am heading a large exporters branch of ECGC Limited, which is the largest credit insurance company in India. And in the past, I have handled buyer underwriting department and policy claims department in ECGC.
So, welcoming all of you. To start with, we'll directly go into the questions around the issues that we are seeing that people are facing. So I would like to put my first question to the two lawyers that we have here. It is around the manufacturing contract. So as we all know that the manufacturing contract these days are very airtight, and there is not much area for negotiation from the manufacturer side. So, there are basically this thing about the delivery clauses, auto discounting, cancellation, force majeure, and product liability insurance. And either the manufacturer has to sign it, or they can, they don't do the business. I mean, basically, they don't have much choice here. So my question is that how do you, what is there any law protecting the small, medium manufacturers for the against these draconian contracts? And is there a way for the manufacturer to circumvent through these? So I would request first Brian to answer that.
It depends on who the customers are. If the customers are big chains like Walmart or those people, it's not negotiable. It is the way it is, and that's just the way they want it to be. The issues are always, as you said, of short shipments, quality control, and indemnity. And the one of the things that can change the dynamic is the terms of the delivery. What we've experienced recently is that the last minute they cancel orders, and the way that those big companies work is the orders are not contracts; they are basically invitations to deal, and it only becomes a contract when you ship the goods or when they confirm the order. So when we have to go after them to collect the money, the issues are always is if they haven't paid for the goods and they haven't picked them up yet, when did they become their goods? So it makes a difference if the goods are sent FOB or whether they are freight forward. If it's FOB, your premises, they own the goods from the moment they leave your premises, and that's a valid claim. But as for the terms of the contract, as you say, they're just not negotiable. What we found, because we had this with department stores like Macy's and these people, they did this a long time ago, and they would send us a book of what they regarded as normal, and said sign it, and we refused to sign it, and we did our own agreement and sent it to them. And at some point, it becomes the point where they need the goods as much as you need the business. And many times we never ever had a written contract signed by either party. Their position was ours are the terms. Our position was ours were the terms. And that became one of the legal fights. But there's always going to be fights. So that's about the only option you've got.
Okay. So to you, Vivek, do you think in the Indian law, is there any way we can, a manufacturer can protect themselves or find a way out of these, find a way to protect themselves even though these clauses are there in the contract?
So it's interesting, actually, so if you look at it from an international perspective, yes, it depends on the terms of the contract, which the laws of which jurisdiction apply. And therefore, those laws will take control of the contract. But if it's actually supposed to be, let's say the Indian manufacturer now is dealing on two sides. He's dealing with his, sort of supply side where people are supplying him goods, or there are some intermediate products which some smaller manufacturers are supplying to him, which he uses to make his own final finished good, which he's shipping out. So on both the ends of the transaction, he is actually governed by Indian law, possibly when, he's procuring all his material. And when he's shipping it out to an international buyer, he's possibly, under international jurisdiction. And as Brian rightly said, it's like, those contracts are fairly rigid, and it's sort of take it or leave it kind of a situation. And the jurisdiction in those contracts is usually the international destination where the goods are meant to be, which actually controls the terms of the contract. So I'll deal with both of them in just a couple of minutes. So as far as the Indian supply side is concerned, really you have the MSME Act, which is the medium, small, and micro enterprise act. And over there, there are some provisions which actually override the terms of the contract itself. So whether your contract has an arbitration clause or doesn't have an arbitration clause, the MSME Act will override it. And whether your contract has any terms for the payment of interest or not, the terms of the MSME Act will override that too. And if there is a delay in the payment of whatever monies have to be paid in terms of the supply, then there is an interest of 18. I think now they made it 24% or something, which has to be paid mandatorily. So as far as the medium, small, micro enterprises are concerned, they are fairly well protected under the MSME Act. In fact, the MSME Act is considered to be a fairly draconian act in terms of how limited the scope it leaves for all the bigger players. If you talk to any one of the bigger players, they'll tell you that even Reliance will tell you that the MSME payments have to go. We will not take a chance on that. The MSME payments have to go. Everything else we'll take care of. So that's fairly well protected there. On the international side, when you're making a supply to a buyer outside, Brian is absolutely right that it really depends on when the contract stands concluded. That's one part. And the second part is, then the terms of the contract, when can you actually cancel the concluded contract and what the payment terms are. Those are the two things together which actually will decide how secure the contract is for you or not. And usually those are the two clauses which we would recommend should be viewed very, very seriously and in depth by whoever is a supplier from India to any international jurisdiction.
Okay. I have to Brian, I was thinking while we were discussing, is there a way you can simplify these contracts? I mean, now since in the current time, the retailers, there are so many retailers who are doing the global restructuring, and there has been many NGOs who are also talking about how the manufacturer on this part of world are getting impacted because of it. Is there any talk or discussions that are happening how to make these contracts slightly simplified and create a security for the manufacturers as well? Because ultimately the retailers need the manufacturers for the goods. I mean, if there is no cash flow available on the manufacturer side, or it gets dried up because of the situations that are happening, the whole supply chain will get affected. So is there anything like that happening in?
It would be very hard to get any American politician to try and introduce legislation that's going to benefit the foreign company versus the American company. That's not how they work. They very much take care of their own, and that's where, and people like Walmart have big lobbyists anyway. So, but what you're talking about really are the big guys are different from the average person. So if your business is primarily Walmart and companies of that size and stature, yes, they can push their weight around. The smaller guys, you should push for your own contract. And just as under US law, unless the contract specifically says otherwise, any disputes are before the United Nations arbitration panel in New York. Now, I've never done one of those. I've never seen one of those, and I typically exclude that because I have no idea how it would work. But what they do with their contracts is they put you at a disadvantage. If you're dealing with Walmart, it's an arbitration in their state where they are probably the biggest thing in the state. So you're not going to get a fair shake. Just the way it works. So I think you need to separate out the big guys from the average guys. And of course, obviously, the big guys is a bigger risk, but there's not a whole lot you can do about it. It is what it is.
Okay, and also you see the cost of, or the not every manufacturer, because if you see the manufacturer community, they are from small, medium, large. The large one can probably afford the lawyers, the international lawyers, but the small ones and the medium ones, they normally try to stay away from the consult the lawyers, because they find it might be, as it is, the business is competitive and they do not have margins, and then the situation creates a higher load on them. So is there a kind of a retainer policy which is available at a competitive rate, where the manufacturers can consult for the something like for consult on the contract signing, or any emails which are slightly on where they have to discuss the legislations, if how to go about it. So do you have something like that in the international side?
Well, the way we work is that if anybody asks a question, we try and give you the answer before we get into the retainer. And that's not going to be legal opinions, but at least look at it and say, well, here's your problems and here's what's likely to happen. In the US, there are lawyers that do these things on a contingency. Typically, they would take 30 to 40%, but typically they won't take them if there's going to be disputes. So if they're not paying just because they're not paying, that's one thing. But if they're raising, which they always do, quality issues and delivery issues and things like that, then it's going to be difficult to get a contingency lawyer. My view is I always try and avoid litigation. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and typically the guy with a bigger pocket can manage the case better than the small guy. So what we try and do before we get into the litigation is try and resolve it. And invariably that involves compromise. Sometimes you have to take a haircut just because the alternative is you're not going to get your money and you don't want to litigate for a year to get, run around and round with discovery and issues like that. US litigation is not like Indian litigation or South African litigation. First of all, you don't get your attorney's fees if you win, unless it's in the contract. Second of all, it's the best system in the world for establishing the truth, but that enables the defendant that owes the money to come up with all sorts of nonsense reasons and ask for discovery and stuff just to delay the thing, because at the end of the day, they're going to pay something, they just don't have to pay legal fees. Their legal fees are cheaper than paying. So we try and settle it as soon as you can and analyze the case and see if there's a chance. If the claim is clear that they owe a certain amount of money, sometimes there's ongoing prior debt and everything else. If there's a clear debt that's not disputed, there is a procedure where you can get a writ of attachment, which basically holds up their assets until such time as the matter is resolved. So they have to put up a bond or security to get their bank accounts released. But that depends on the facts.
So moving from contract, I think what we need to now see, how do we cover the shipment so that insurance plays a very important role, and especially as we talk further, I think it will highlight that how the insurance can actually help in these difficult times and unpredictable times as well. So I would request Subhash to give a quick introduction to ECGC, and he can also talk about the key product offer that ECGC is offering, and at the same time also talk about that ECGC being a government organization under Ministry of Commerce, is there any advantage over the do they offer any advantage over the international credit insurance companies, and specifically in terms of rates?
Hi everyone. ECGC is the pioneer in its line of business in India. It was established around 62 years back, so the experience goes long back. And we come under the aegis of the Ministry of Commerce. Almost all stakeholders in export industry are there on our board. And there are representatives from Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Finance, RBI, banker fraternity, even export bodies. So you can see that all stakeholders' interests are actually represented in our policy, which we frame for the exporters as well as bankers. We are serving exporter community as well as banker community. The banking community is being served basically with a motive to promote the exports only, because by helping banking sector, we are indirectly promoting finance to the exporter community, so that they can avail easy finance and manufacture the goods and export, so that more and more export takes place from India. So that is about ECGC. And yes, second part was the product offering. So ECGC has in its journey introduced several products. Earlier there was only one product, but now we have about 15 products for the exporters. Now exporter can get cover even for a single shipment, for a single buyer, for a group of buyers, for entire buyer portfolio. And we have the cover for those markets also, which other credit insurers usually don't go for. Countries in African continent or CIE countries like, so CIS countries, sorry. So we have offering means you name and we have the product. So almost every product is there. We cover consignment basis transactions also, direct exports also. Now, as far as the advantage over credit, private credit insurers or international credit insurance companies, first of all, I will say that our cover is spread over almost all countries. You will find hardly any country which is off cover. We are offering cover for even Sudan, Iraq, where no other credit insurance company will touch. That is one thing. We can offer cover in such difficult markets also. And then we have sovereign bank backing. We are under Ministry of Commerce, so we have already a good capacity. We are ICRA rating is IAAA, so that means we have best capacity for payment of claims, as well as if there is any need in catastrophic times, then there is a government backing. So that kind of cushion is there with ECGC. And secondly, since it's a government organization, 100% government organization, we are for export promotion. Though there is certainly commercial interest, no doubt. Without commercial interest, we cannot sustain our business. But there is a component of promotion of exports, and that's why there is a focus on MSME sector. Where, and you know that in MSME sector, the customers for exporters will be dealing with buyers who are not that big. They are small buyers. We are usually getting the limit cover on such buyers is difficult. So mostly private credit insurers or international credit insurance company will not like to give cover on such buyers, but we are offering the cover. So there are several. And in terms of rate, I will say with my experience that we are very competitive in rate. We are better. We have better rates than any other credit insurance agency in the world, considering the kind of cover we can offer.
Yeah. Okay. So moving to Ketan, I would like to ask him, what kind of risk do you see in the market today? And how is your company aligning itself to cover risk? And yeah, let's start with that and we move to the next one then, because of it.
Thank you, Smita, and good evening to everybody. My name is Ketan. I am part of Marsh & McLennan Group of companies. I am based in Dubai, and I handle the Middle East and Africa business for so in terms of risk that we are seeing, I think everybody would agree that we are going through very unprecedented times and challenging environment right now. And there is a lot of uncertainty right now going on in the trade environment. So if you see the current trends in the apparel industry or any other industry for that matter, you will find there are increased delays in terms of payments. There are increased defaults now, because typically you will find the insurance policy will respond after 90 days or 20 days, etc. Where now you will see actually defaults happening. So you'll find a lot of defaults happening. In fact, in the region that I am in, you will find a lot of insolvencies, bankruptcies happening. And in fact, this would increase more because there is a lot of pressure on the cash flow cycles per se. So in nutshell, I think there is a increased credit risk perception, and there is increased credit risk in the environment right now. And businesses have to take care of those risks. What we are seeing, the impact of this increased credit risk is directly on the supply chain cycles, both as some of the panelists mentioned on the buyer side and also on the supplier side. So that's where I think we are seeing the environment is changing so drastically every day. What the kind of hazards that we're seeing in the supply chain are kind of leading to various new situations. And while Subhash mentioned about various covers, there is also need for the parties involved to take care of their own risk management process, where they can tighten the contracts, and maybe the lawyers can mention about how you can do that. But tightening the contracts is very important these days. You need to really clearly define some of the termination clauses. That is one we try to address to our customers these days. We also try to look at if there can be any kind of take or pay sort of clauses built in, if that is possible. And so these mechanisms would really help in terms of managing the credit risk per se. On the solution side, what we are trying to do right now is we are trying to help clients to understand this risk. We're trying to help clients to educate about the products on the credit insurance side. And also we're trying to see how the clients can actually build their system in order to kind of address these issues in future. So in terms of our role, it's very clear role. We are advising clients to look at various situations and make them prepared for the future business. At the same time, wherever we are having those policies in place, we are helping the clients to get the address to those queries and situations. One thing that what we have seen recently is a lot of clients have actually tried to kind of improve their risk management systems. So a lot of people have started taking third-party opinions on certain buyers, which is a good practice, which was kind of lacking earlier in the system, which is something which we understand is very useful. So that's one good step. At the same time, we are also advising clients to see how these contracts can be protected. So I think overall, we are going to see some uncertain times, but I think there will be also opportunities for clients to do better business.
Great. Moving on the same line, so in context to in apparel industry and India during the current situation of COVID, what products are useful, and is there any specific product that you have created for these times?
So in terms of products, there are existing products which are basically, as Subhash mentioned, credit insurance product. ECEC deals with the international markets. However, there are domestic credit insurance products also available. So that's something people were not utilizing very regularly. Maybe that is one good product people can start using it. Secondly, there are structured credit product also that we deal with, not just in India, but outside of India also. So for suppliers, you can have covers for cancellation of contracts by the buyers. So it's a contract frustration, contract cancellation cover. If you kind of look at these contracts, if there are issues with regards to, say, termination because of political situations or because of the kind of unilateral cancellation of the contracts by the buyer, these covers can be structured. Secondly, for say buyers, insurance covers are always covering the non-payment cover, as Subhash mentioned earlier, and we are seeing more structured sort of products for these situations. So that's one product. And the third product that we are seeing is maybe something like a political risk situation, where what we believe is because of the current pandemic situation, there will be increased burden on the sovereigns of various governments. And generally what we see is after pandemic, there are always some kind of a political crisis in countries, especially when there could be elections coming up. So typically when you see a pandemic, every government will actually focus on the response on pandemic per se. So the treasuries are kind of emptied in that direction. But I think there is also a need for garnering new revenues. Also, there could be some austerity measures that could come in future. So this might lead to some sort of a political crisis or some sort of a civil kind of rebellion or something like that. It might lead to some political actions, and political risk insurance for investments could be useful for clients who are having exposures outside of India. So these are the few products that we can look at.
Okay. So moving to you, Subhash, and continuing on the same COVID line, what are the measures taken by ECGC to support the policyholders in these times? And do you think, I mean, because the policies are made, what I also want you to touch on is, do you think these measures were effectively implemented? And if not, I mean, if there is any shortcoming, what are the additional steps that the company is taking to ensure the implementation?
Yeah, see, as a consequence of COVID-19 breakout, ECGC has taken a slew of measures. And first of all is that during these times, exporters do not have access to their offices and all that. So we have increased the timeline for various returns. Maybe it is a return submission of declarations or submission of overdue reporting and all that. That is one thing. Secondly, we have given discretion to the exporters to take mitigating steps. Now, in these times, there are a lot of requests from buyers for extension in due date because they are not able to meet the original commitments. So they are asking for extension. Now, secondly, it may be also, we have come across many cases where goods are lying on the port and buyer is not coming forward to accept the goods. Now, in such cases, exporter has to give extension in due date, or they have to ship the goods to some other buyer, alternate buyer, resell goods to some other buyer, or bring the goods back to India if that is possible, if that is profitable for him. So in all these cases, there are losses involved. In usual times, in normal times, what we ask exporter is, we have given some discretion in those normal times also, but beyond a certain percentage, we expect the customers to take approval from ECGC because these involve losses. But in these times, COVID-19 times, we have given discretion to the exporters to take the mitigating steps so that time is not lost. They can there and then freeze their losses. So they can resell the goods to alternate buyer on their own without seeking prior approval. They can give the extension in due date to the buyer, or they can re-import the goods back to India. So these are all mitigating steps for which discretion has been given to the exporter. Now, another thing is that there is a waiting period concept for the filing of claims. If some loss has happened and it has eventually converted into claim, now there is a waiting period of 4 months. After lodgement of the claim, there is a waiting period of 4 months from the due date of the payment. So that normally it is 4 months. Worldwide, 4 months is the normal waiting period. But now ECGC has reduced it to 1 month. So we will not be waiting for 4 months from the due date. It is only 1 month. So that the cash flow of the exporter is improved a little bit, right? So there will be faster payment of claim because we will not be waiting for 4 months. So these are some steps which we have taken, and all these steps have been implemented already. Like we are getting many requests from the exporters, like other insurers would also be getting, and we are telling them, we have already communicated to them all that, okay, you can take mitigating steps only if those actions should not violate actually the rule of the law, rule of the land, right? If their RBI stipulation says something else, so that has to be followed. So these are the steps which we have taken. And what was the second part?
So you covered it. I asked about the implementation, which you have.
So these are already implemented.
Yeah. So since you have been, doing work around ECGC, and there has been, I think ECGC has also been in talk, and insurance companies have been in talk in last few months. So did you see the increase in the policy cover and in last 4 months?
Yes. In last 4 months, we have got many inquiries, and to tell you the truth, many of those inquiries have converted into the policies also. Already we have issued, I'm telling about my branch, and so is happening with other branches also across India. So yes, many inquiries are happening. Many exporters are realizing that if COVID-19 can happen today, a situation similar to to this can happen at a later stage also. So they are realizing the severity it can bring in their payment payment risk from the overseas buyer. So they are inquiring, they are seeking the cover, and we have already issued many covers, and there are several considerations under process also. But with it, I will frankly say that with it, there is another there is another flip side, that we are increasing the we are getting increased number of default cases. We are getting increased number of claims also. But ECGC has never hesitated in settling the claims. We are always there for the claims. So that's not an issue. That is an outcome of this situation. That's all.
And you have the factoring facility also available, because currently, if you see, the buyers have moved to, many of the buyers are moving to the payment term of 90, 120 and 180.
Right. You rightly said, yes, we have factoring facility, but that is currently available to the MSME sector only, not to the large exports. There is a cap of there is a threshold of turnover. Export turnover should be below certain limit. I think that is about 200 crore. So below 200 crore is there, then yes, factoring can be considered. Above that, it cannot be considered.
Okay. So I would like to go to Ravish on this one, Ravindra on this one. From the manufacturer or the suppliers, they are working with the multiple retailers at this stage. And if any retailer goes for a financial restructuring, or their shipments are put on hold, then the cash management for that and the cash flow for that particular retailer is disrupted. But a company might be working with multiple retailers. So from the banking perspective, my question would be that if one retailer is going, shipments from one retailer is getting affected, do you continue to give the cash flow in a smooth manner to the other retailers who are having a good credit rating? And how do you decide that?
Yeah, good evening and good morning to all. I'm Ravindra Mishra. I'm DGM State Bank of India. I'm working out of Delhi, and we have got huge number of exporters. And the question you have put is that we are funding actually the manufacturer or the supplier of the goods from India. Now, one of the retailers goes bust actually somewhere. It will depend on how much supplies he is making to that retailer actually. If majority of the supplies are to one retailer, he is dependent on one retailer, and his entire business is getting affected because of that one retailer, then of course there will be a review. We'll sit with the exporter how he's going to find out or increasing his supplies to other retailers, or whether he is able to reduce its business scale because of that retailer. So all these things will be taken up with the exporter or the manufacturer, and if he is able to satisfy the banker that it is not going to affect his business, and he is going to find another retailer of the same size, or he is going to increase his supplies to other retailers in the similar numbers. So I think bankers are not going to step into any, or are not going to see any issue in this actually. Yes, Smita.
Yeah, great. So, and also, can you talk about the factoring facility? Do you have the facility to finance the business for a longer period? I mean, for the longer payment term, which is happening in the market currently, and it is happening. I think it has happening in abundance currently because most of the retailers are going out and asking for a longer payment term.
See, what bankers are doing is we are going by what manufacturer decides about his contracts with the retailers or his buyers. So whatever his decision is about the period which he is taking with his buyers, we go by that cycle actually. But if he feels that today's times, when COVID times are there and his period is going to extend further, then definitely we have also come out with a scheme where we are saying that this is a liberalized working capital assessment, where you can come to us, you can say that we are going to now increase our cover period or receivables period, or we are going to reduce our margins on our raw materials, where larger funding can be available to the manufacturers. So already bank has put in place the system to support the exporters. So I think there is not going to be any problem, but we are also again covered by the Reserve Bank of India guidelines in this regard. And Reserve Bank of India has already extended the period from 9 months maximum to 15 months. So that leverage is already available to the manufacturers.
So what I mean to ask was, suppose the retailer is saying that they will make the payment in 120 days for a particular shipment, and the manufacturer has to fund the orders which are flowing in this month. So when the manufacturer submits the document bank to bank, do you release the payment to the manufacturer immediately for their current shipment so that they can finance and go ahead with the financing of the current shipment?
Yes, we exporters, any exporter or manufacturer, if he has got a limit or he has got bank finance available to him, it will be as per the terms set by the bank and himself actually. What is the business like he has? So that will be according to his business terms. If he has got 120 days business terms or built-in bill discounting limit, where 120 days is permissible and it is accepted by the bank, and a arrangement letter or sanction letter has been accepted by him, it will be given to him. One thing I would suggest here is that now is the time when we are meeting exporters and they're facing problems with regard to rigidity of the contract with the buyer actually. If the buyer has decided earlier that 120 days will be the payment terms, so I think there has to be some flexibility between buyer and seller also. Based on that, bank can also decide. So suppose your contract does not say going beyond 120 days, how can bank can decide going beyond 120 days?
I would now go back on the law side of the, to talk about on that side of the work again. So if, currently since the market is quite volatile and the financial health of the retailers are not clear, in the sense that even the strong retailers who look, who seem to have a strong financial holding, are going into financial restructuring also. So do we, can a supplier take a proactive or a preemptive measure and kind of take any legal steps to cover themselves for knowing that the situation might happen? So I would ask this question from Brian.
It's fairly complicated. This is the way it goes. When a company files for a Chapter 11, that's basically asking the court for a freezing of any collection so that they can organize a restructure. Over a period of time, they will come up with a plan which will provide that, for example, secured creditors get 100 cents on the dollar, unsecured creditors get 20 cents on the dollar. And if that plan is approved by each class of creditors and approved by the court, then that becomes the resolution of the case. So there's nothing you can do to really affect that. You've got to wait for the plan if it's prior debt. A couple of things to realize, though, is that if there are goods that are on the way there and they file for the Chapter 11, any goods that were delivered, I think it's within 60 days, or I can get you the exact time, but anything immediately prior to the bankruptcy, you can reclaim, which means you demand that they give it back. And invariably what will happen is that they will convert that claim to what's called an administrative claim. Anything supplied after the filing of the Chapter 11 is an administrative claim, and administrative claims are paid before any previous claims other than secured debt. So it's fairly complex, but the important thing is that if you get a filing, a notice of a filing of a bankruptcy, and there have been fairly either goods in transit or goods that have just been delivered, you need to get hold of a lawyer and figure out what your remedies are. And I mean, it's happening more and more, as you know, and it particularly happens with retailers because it's a way of getting out of leases. So the restructure normally involves getting rid of the bad stores, but continuing with business. But sometimes it doesn't work.
So that is if they have filed the Chapter 11. My question is that if before they file the Chapter 11, and based on my relationship with the retailer, I kind of preempt that this situation might happen, and I reach out to a lawyer and say, I want to protect myself. Can you suggest me some legal recourse on this line?
Well, if you think it's going to happen, then I would be very leery about delivering the goods, because it doesn't. You can't trust anybody to try and negotiate something different. So the other thing is also sometimes they'll come to you and say, "I want some more goods," and if it's a retail chain, understand getting goods in the door before the filing is a strategy, because that gives them liquidity. So if they suddenly are ordering or demanding early deliveries, that's a warning sign. And just be a little bit careful of that. But as I say, if you've delivered, I think it's 30 to 60 days prior to the filing, then there is a demand to be made to get your goods back, or to be treated as a priority claim under the post-filing claims. It's fairly complicated and hard to explain, but you know, it's important to ask the questions before it happens. Because each one is fact-driven.
Yeah. So to you, Vivek, the similar line of question from the Indian perspective, can a manufacturer in India cover itself by going to the, taking a legal recourse based on the assumption or preemptive measure that there might be something happening with the the retailer?
Well, so, again, as correctly stated, so India has a parallel law over here, which is under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, and which is now becoming increasingly popular. But, we have to understand that the class of creditors, which is absolutely protected and which takes the front seat on the table, the decision-making table, is basically the financial creditors. They're the ones who are the lenders, where money has been lent for time value of money, and they are the ones who actually take control of the entire decision-making process as far as the manufacturer or the retailer is concerned, whoever is under insolvency. But as far as suppliers, vendors, or let's say tier 2 manufacturers who are basically supplying intermediate goods, as I said, to the final guy, they all fall under the category of operational creditors or other creditors. Now, they don't really have a table seat. They basically, are on the ringside, and whatever plan is filed, resolution plan is filed and approved by the financial creditors will be applicable to them. My own experience, even though the Insolvency Act is fairly nascent in India, it's only, I think, 3 years old now, 3.5 years old. But my own experience has been that operational creditors usually get the rough end of the stick. They really, don't even get maybe 20 cents to a dollar. 20 cents is very generous, actually. They would probably end up with maybe 10 cents or something like that. Now, is there a way in which they can prevent this kind of a thing happening to them? Well, so there is, within the insolvency process, there's a division between two timelines. So one is any supplies made before the insolvency has happened. Now that's all part of the insolvency, the restructuring, the resolution. So there's nothing to do, you're just in the queue there. Now, part of the deal in under the Indian law is that as soon as the insolvency kicks in, there is also a moratorium that kicks in. So, no financial creditor can demand for a period of 180 days, which is the resolution period. They can demand that, they be paid interest or they be paid their debt, or nobody has any priority. There's a moratorium complete that nobody can raise a demand against the company. Now, resultant of that is that, the company has to be maintained as an ongoing concern, and therefore any supplies made after the moratorium kicks in or after the resolution process kicks in is really just business as usual. You make a supply, you get a payment. It has nothing to do with the restructuring because the company is continuing as an ongoing business concern. So the smart thing to do, as Brian said rightly, would be that, if you're getting any indications or if you're getting any signals that the company has the chances of, going under, I would strongly suggest that, you look at your payment terms, revisit the credit terms. If you can make a supply against cash, or if you can make supply against the minimum possible credit period, that'll be a great idea. Or a secure payment like an NC or a bank guarantee or anything of that sort. Alternatively, maybe you would just kind of, let the insolvency happen, kick in, and then, your supplies are as an ongoing thing. But really, these are all business plays. If you were to ask me from a legal perspective, is there a manner in which, anything can be done to break the queue so that I am standing in front of the queue? Doubtful. Very doubtful. It's really, you are in a class of creditors and you'll be treated as that class of creditors and equally with everybody else. So, there'll be no preferential treatment given to you or that class of, amongst that class of creditors. If you're a different class of creditors, sure, you may be treated differently, but everybody in that class will be treated equally. Yeah.
In the similar line, you see during the lockdowns, retailers have asked for the extended payment term, but at the same time, the manufacturer also had the issues around the labor shortages and scarcity and things. So there has been delivery delays. So since at the during the lockdown, retailer have asked for the extension of payment, but at the same time, if manufacturer is getting delayed on the delivery and in the contract there is a requirement for a discounting or cancellation, which is very clear. But lockdown is an unprecedented time, and the unprecedented time. So those clauses, do they still stand, or is there a law to override those?
Well, so you have to understand the fair nature of a contract. A contract, by its very nature, Smita, is basically allocation of risk. So there is a business transaction happening, and there's always a risk associated with business transactions. And how you allocate the risk in the contract on which side will decide who's carrying the risk, right? So usually in a delivery contract, essentially the delivery is the risk that the buyer is dealing with, and payment is the risk that the supplier is dealing with. So how I am able to secure my payment best is really how I'm dealing with my risk. Okay. Now, the only overriding clause I can, off the top of my head, think which can actually suspend the risk allocation is really a force majeure clause, where, something like the pandemic happens or something like, usually the force majeure would have three elements to it. One, it should be something which is not foreseen or foreseeable. So therefore, it was not really, sort of something which was in the contemplation of the parties. Number two, it wasn't really part of the contract, and therefore it wasn't allocated to either side of the contract, and it was something which was hanging in the air. And third is that, either party didn't have any control on it. So, whatever are the consequences flowing out of that happening, you had no control on it. So that'll be really the only way that you could get out of. But the pandemic really, so there have been varying judgments where people, where judicial authorities, courts have also held that, whether the pandemic is a force majeure situation or not is also questionable. And whether it is covered under a contract or not is basically part of the contract. So, many times the contract has an exhaustive list of what will be a force majeure, and many times it's only an illustrative list. So, slightly complicated, but it'll really depend on the contract, on how it goes. Yeah.
So coming to Subhash, I wanted to ask him, what is the claim settlements that you have seen? I mean, what do you think how, from ECGC, how the claim settlements have been handled? And can you give some feedback on the way it's been handled?
Yeah. So, see, for any policyholder, the crux of any product is the claim. So, as I said earlier also, that ECGC is always for payment of claims, and when we process the claim, this is the mindset with which we start processing the claim. Rarely will come a situation when we will be regretting the claim, and that will be basically when the contractual obligation has been violated from the exporter side, right? Because we are covering the risk on the buyer. If buyer doesn't meet his agreed commitments, then yes, any credit insurance will certainly come to the help of exporter. But if exporter is not able to meet the commitments, then yes, those can be the situation where claims are regretted. Otherwise, we have settled almost all claims, and there are certain technical issues also, but those issues are also considered in the light of the circumstances. For example, I will cite an issue that it's very easy for any buyer to raise quality disputes, right? If there is a if some buyer wants to deny the liability, so the best way is saying that okay, the quality is not good. But in that situation, thumb rule is that quality is not covered by any credit insurance company, and so is the case with ECGC also. But it will not be like outright rejection, right? We will go through the documents, shipping documents, as well as the correspondence that has taken place between the exporter and buyer, and try to ascertain that what is the actual background to this issue. And if yes, it is ascertained that the issue has been raised baselessly, or it's just a pretext to avoid the payment, we have settled the claim in past and we settle the claim. So the basic thing is that ECGC considers the claim, and we try to expedite the claim as much as possible. So, and it's very easy process. The documentary requirement is also very easy. The documents required are the documents which are actually involved in any export transaction, like shipping bill, bill of lading, invoices, right, packing list. These are the documents which usually are involved in export transaction, or correspondence which has taken place between the exporter and buyer. So it's not a very cumbersome process. It's very easy process, and we are for the claims. Only thing is that, yeah.
So you have settled the claims for the cancelled orders as well.
See, if shipment has taken, our role comes post shipment, right? Pre-shipment cover, pre-shipment risks are not covered. So if shipment has already been made, now buyer says that I will not accept the goods, or order is cancelled, we are there for the exporter. Those goods can be resold to some other buyer. We are there at discount. We will cover the damage retention discount given to the alternate buyer. Or if exporter wants to bring the goods back to India, again we are there for exporter. Or goods are tailor-made, they cannot be resold, they cannot be brought back to India because there will not be any salvage value. So yes, in that situation, we can allow the abandonment also. So these are all the options available to the exporters. In case an order is cancelled after having made the shipment, or is there any, or if there is any change in the policy of government of the buyer, right? When the order was placed and when shipment was made, there was certain policy. Now policy has changed. Let us say it is a food item. Now FDA of USA has come out with a new regulation where permissible range of a particular chemical in a particular food was somewhat something else. Now it is something else. So it doesn't meet the requirement, new requirements. Now buyer will not be in a position to take the goods. So in that situation, ECGC will come to the help of the exporter.
And also, if the customers are downgraded, like retailer is downgraded while in the process of the shipment, when the goods are in WIP, and do they still have the coverage? I mean, what is the time that you give to the exporter to take a back step on that? Because their shipments are already in WIP based on the earlier credit rating, and now since they have been downgraded. If the exporter wants to stop, they cannot just stop it at that stage. So they need time. What is the step? I mean, what is the...
Yeah. So see, ECGC never takes a knee-jerk reaction. If there are developments, adverse developments regarding the buyer, for example, one of my policyholder has reported overdue non-payment on a particular buyer. There are other exporters also, policyholders also, who might be dealing with that buyer. I will not simply reject the limit or cancel the limit of those exporters, because as you rightly said, they might be having the goods already ready for the shipment, or work in progress might be there. So I will not simply cancel the limits which was sanctioned to those exporters just because one exporter has come to me and said that this is my non-payment information. Our modus operandi is that we will seek experience of other policyholders, that what is your experience? Have you been getting the payment in time or not? If the experience of other exporters is good, then we will not cancel the limit. We will allow the exporters to retain the limits which were there. We will allow further shipments also. Let me give you an example. JCPenney. JCPenney has now gone bust. Since last 2 years, none of the credit insurer player in India has been giving the limit on JCPenney. But we continue to have the limit, continue to give the limit, at least retain the limit at the existing levels. We didn't take further exposure, but we allowed our customers to continue the business. We didn't take knee-jerk reaction. We were always studying what is happening. Now JCPenney has gone bust. But this is how we actually helped our customers to do business, to continue business, and the amount of loss which they have now incurred is much less than what would have incurred if I would have stopped the shipment all of a sudden. So that is not, we don't take knee-jerk reaction. Now, when I receive some overdue information, non-payment information from one of my policyholders, it is my duty, and it is what we do. We send the information through mailers to our other policyholders who are dealing with that buyer, so that they can exercise caution while dealing with this buyer. Right now, their payment experience might be excellent, but this is a mail so that they can exercise caution in future dealings. Okay. So that is what we do.
Great, thank you. And Ketan, the similar question to you. How do you see your claim settlement process, and what is the rate of settlement?
Right. So I think, as I mentioned, we need to really break down the supply chain. What we are seeing is there are more claims happening on the post-shipment side, where the invoices have been kind of made and goods have been accepted. And right now, what we are seeing, there are notifications being issued by the customers for overdues. Typically, there is a waiting period of 180 days. So we really haven't seen claims being lodged right now, but we do expect that the claims would come very soon. So I'm expecting that the claims will be maybe in millions of dollars across the globe. Here, what we are seeing, typically the working capital cycles have been extended. So which means that even the customers have asked for extension of payment dates. So they have asked for 1 month extension, 2 month extension. So there is no actual lodgement of claim which has happened. But yes, I think maybe in next couple of months, we will have a complete picture as to whether claims are going to come or not. If I have to give you some correlation to 2008 crisis, I think 2008 crisis had seen total claims of about $5 billion on account of credit risk. And a lot of these claims were paid. Almost $3.5 billion of claims were paid. So there is a good amount of claim payment which is done. At the same time, we also see recoveries happening post the crisis, which would mean that if the company is not gone bankrupt, there would be good chances of recoveries. And I think as some of the panelists mentioned that, and Subhash mentioned, that if you generally stop the shipments, you might incur a larger loss. Whereas if you continue to support the clients, you might incur some sort of better recovery. What I must say that globally insurers have taken a very cautious route because they are also constrained by their capital. As of now, there are a lot of notifications which are there, which means that they also have to make a provision of these notifications in their balance sheets. So unless you, and they're regulated by various international banking norms and insurance norms. So they have to make proper provisions for their SLRs and those kind of liquidity ratios. So it is right now we are seeing some kind of a dampening in the insurance market, that people are being very cautious, and globally trades are not happening much. I think trade volumes have gone down. So as of now, just to give you an answer, it's not that we have seen a lot of claims, but we do expect these claims to come. Just to answer your other question, Smita, in terms of suppliers' risk of manufacturing certain goods and non-delivering, I think not in credit insurance, but there are other insurance cover which are available, which are like non-damage business interruption. So typically, you will find business interruption covers are applied for any kind of a physical damage of property because of which the manufacturing is not done. But there are also covers which have now structured in the global market, not in credit, but in the property side, where because of, say, non-damage events like pandemic can also be covered. So there are covers like trade disruption insurance, which sometimes cover these kind of risks. But obviously, these have to be taken before the event happens. As of now, if you ask for anybody, nobody is going to give this covers. But maybe once the this cycle gets over, we will find takers for those kind of covers in future. But these are very far and few, very structured covers. And maybe Indian markets are not, as of now, exposed or maybe introduced to these kind of covers.
Thank you. Brian, can we have the closing comment and advice as an advice from you to the manufacturing community?
I think being proactive is a good thing. I think if you have a standing relationship, it's a good thing to have us review it and see whether we can make any improvements or give any advice. The other important thing to remember is that if you have warning lights, for example, JCPenney that was mentioned, and any payments that are made to you immediately prior to the filing of the bankruptcy could be a preference. So if there's talk about we'll pay you on the past invoices if you ship us goods, etc., that needs to be carefully done so that it doesn't create a preference. You don't want to be giving them more goods because they paid you and then have to give the money back. So just as a general rule, we encourage, we like to be business people first. So we encourage people calling to make the business decision based on the knowledge of the law. That's the only way I can do it. Every bankruptcy filing, by the way, is very fact intensive. So it's hard to generalize of what you should or shouldn't do. But looking for advice earlier is better than later.
Great, thank you. So Vivek, from you as well, a closing comment and any advice?
Yeah, so the only thing I'd say is that, pay attention to the contract. many times what happens is that, in an eagerness to secure the business, we are willing to, take on possibly a risk we should not be taking on. And, our risk profiling or risk appetite is not commensurate to the risk we're taking. That's really not the way business is done. So pay attention to the contract, make sure that the risk is allocated properly, and you're basically chewing on, you're biting as much as you can, digest or chew, not anything more than that. I'd recommend that. Whatever you're not able to cover in your contract with your buyer or supplier or in whatever manner, make sure you have the benefit of an insurance, whether it's an ECGC or a general insurance or whatever. But make sure that whatever risk can be covered, which you weren't able to cover in the contract and can be covered with a third party on an insurance basis, should be done. So, that's the only way to make business as secure as it possibly can be done. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And from Ravindra, closing comments.
Yeah, basically my closing comment would be that all the manufacturers should, first thing is that, as rightly said, that they should, from banking point of view also, they should revisit their contracts with the buyers actually, whether the payment period is good enough for them or they want to extend it, and whether it has a flexibility for future such things. Secondly, they should immediately revisit their business cycle or working capital cycle and immediately reach out to the banks, because banks this time they have been very proactive in providing support to the exporters or the manufacturer. So my closing remarks would be immediately to reach out to the bank, ask for the extra finance if you don't have the equity, but do it very fast. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. It was a very insightful discussion, and I hope people, the viewers, are able to were able to take good takeaways from the discussion, and will be taking steps to cover themselves to do business more in a more secure manner. Thank you.
Thank you.